Today I'm going to tell you about one of the most fascinating events in animatronic history, concept unification. Back when I made my Chuck E. Cheese video a few years back, I had to go through so many script writing processes because I kept getting way too bogged down on this specific timeline, and I really needed to keep the video around 10 minutes. But now that you guys have proven that you're fine with me yapping about my special interests for hours on end, welcome to the deep dive I've been preparing my entire life for. Concept unification, in very simplistic terms, refers to the process in which two 1980s arcade and pizza restaurants merged into a single entity, an entity that would come to be known as Chuck E. Cheese's. But our story starts much, much earlier, so I take you back to San Jose, California in 1977. Our story starts with a little startup brand that absolutely nobody has ever heard of before, Atari. Yes, this animatronic deep dive actually begins with Pong. Deal with it. In the late 1970s, Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, was looking for brand new ways to expand his ever-growing arcade empire. Video arcades were very much already a thing at this point, but they were mostly located in like pool halls or bars and mostly adult-oriented spaces, which of course leaves out a very core audience, kids. So Nolan Bushnell had the genius idea, what if we make a casino for children? Okay, maybe not exactly that, but at the time, Nolan Bushnell was only earning money from the initial sale of these arcade cabinets to third parties, and therefore missed out on any of the accumulating revenue that these machines generated once purchased by their clients. So the obvious next step would be to put these machines in a place he had control over, so then he could obtain all the revenue that these machines gave. And then he just slapped in some pizza on the concept because, as he said himself, if the dough is good, the cheese is good, and the sauce is good, the pizza is good. And there are very few components and not too many ways to screw it up. You gotta love the honesty. And thus, an iconic pizza brand was born, Coyote Pizza. Wait, what? Yes, Coyote Pizza was actually the working title of this video arcade and pizza chain in the early stages. You see, when Nolan Bushnell was walking through the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, he stumbled across a mascot costume. That costume was a wonderful coyote that fit perfectly with his brand. The stars had truly aligned. Nolan Bushnell bought the costume on the spot and had them ship it over to their headquarters in California. But get this, when it arrived in California, it was not a coyote. It was, in fact, a rat. And thus, an iconic pizza brand was born, Rick Rat's Pizza. What is going on? Everyone in Bushnell's inner circle was begging him not to name it Rick Rat's Pizza, telling him you cannot associate a pizza chain with rats, not knowing that 40 years later, the entire internet would be thirsting over a literal pizza rat. And so, I love this energy from him. Bushnell said, you name it. I don't give a shit what it's called, but it has to be happy. And thus, an iconic pizza brand was born, Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. And inspired by the Enchanted Tiki Room over at Disney, Bushnell decided that in addition to pizza and games, this restaurant would offer entertainment in the form of animatronic characters. And during the heyday of Pizza Time Theater, dozens of characters rotated through the ever-changing cast of the Pizza Time players. Some notable additions include Krusty the Cat, Madam Oink, and Harmony Howlett, along with more standalone characters such as Dolly Dimples, Artie Antlers, and the King, a character which once earned me a cease and desist order. But that is a story for another day. But there are really only 5 Pizza Time players I want to focus on today. Chuck E. Cheese, our lovable frontman rat sporting a bowler hat, a cigar, and an offensively strong Brooklyn accent.
By now, it's probably no surprise to anybody that we got a birthday number coming up here.
Helen Henney, a clucking Broadway performer past her prime. Mr. Munch, a Cookie Monster knockoff as described by Pizza Time Theater's head of entertainment at the time. Jasper T. Jowls, a country music loving hound. And Pasquale P. Pie Plate, an Italian chef born out of an LSD-induced nightmare.
You know I'm here to make it a pizza.
For a majority of the history of Pizza Time Theater, these were your core characters. Now, these incarnations of the animatronics might appear to have slightly limited movements compared to the animatronics you might be familiar with growing up around Chuck E. Cheese. That's because these early cyberamic animatronics are very different mechanically than some of the characters you would see in restaurants in the 90s. But to explain that, we must now visit Chuck E. Cheese's arch nemesis, Showbiz Pizza Place. But before we do that, I want to take a quick second to thank the sponsor of today's video, AG1. AG1 is your daily health drink, and each scoop of AG1 powder contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients. And you might be asking, Sully, how on earth do they fit all of that into a single scoop of powder? Good question. AG1 has a very handy ingredients guide over on their website so you can stay informed about what you are ingesting and adding to your diet. Now, I should point out AG1 is not a meal replacement drink, but what it can do is fill in nutrient gaps in your diet and replenish otherwise under-consumed daily nutrients. So I personally choose to add a scoop of AG1 to my daily protein smoothies. It gives me a nice boost during the late night editing sessions. I would highly recommend incorporating it into a chocolate peanut butter protein smoothie. Thank me later. But others prefer to drink it just mixed with water, which is why these travel packs and liquid supplements come in so handy, so you can always have your AG1 on the go. You can get started with AG1 for less than $3 a day by using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on the screen right now. You'll also receive $76 worth of free add-ons when you subscribe using my link, so there couldn't be a better time to try AG1. So thanks again to AG1 for sponsoring this video, and now back to your regularly scheduled animatronics video essay. The story of Showbiz Pizza Place begins at a Holiday Inn, or rather several Holiday Inns. Robert Brock was the owner and founder of Brock Hotel Corporation, which at the time was the largest individual franchisee of Holiday Inn hotels. He also owned what is now known as Residence Inn by Marriott, so you know, just a monopoly man in the hotel industry. But Brock wasn't satisfied just making his millions in the hotel business. As soon as he saw Chuck E. Cheese, he said, I want some of that. So Brock entered a multi-million-dollar contract with Pizza Time Theater to become their largest franchisee as well. He was expecting to open hundreds of these locations across the United States, until he got cold feet. You see, when Robert Brock was walking around the IAAPA show one year, he too came across something that caught his eye. That something and someone was Aaron Fechter of Creative Engineering. Brock immediately realized that the animatronic characters that Creative Engineering was producing at the time were much more sophisticated than the ones that Pizza Time Theater were putting out at the time. These animatronics were full body, had hyper-realistic movements, and could basically play their own instruments, kind of. So much like an ungrateful toddler when he sees a brand new shiny toy in the corner, Brock decided to terminate his contract with Pizza Time Theater and begin a new business venture alongside Creative Engineering. They too were going to create their own video arcade and pizza chain, and that chain would come to be known as Showbiz Pizza Place. It is nearly identical to Pizza Time Theater in almost every aspect. You got your video arcade, mediocre pizza, and entertainment in the form of animatronic characters. But these animatronic characters were game-changing. Let me introduce you to your band's favorite band, the Rockafire Explosion. Coming to you live from Showbiz Pizza Place every day across 3 stages, the Rockafire Explosion consisted of 7 main characters. Over on stage right, you have Rolfe DeWolf and Earl Schmerl, a failed comedian and his wisecracking puppet who perform variety skits throughout the shows. On center stage, you found the main Rockafire Explosion band members. Duke LaRue, a dog in a glitzy silver spacesuit who plays the drums. Fats Geronimo, the frontman gorilla who rocked out on the Tune Machine. Beach Bear, a guitar-playing bear, surfing in while sporting some swim trunks, and Mitzi Mozzarella, their vocalist and resident cheerleading mouse. Finally, on stage left, you would find Showbiz Pizza's own mascot, Billy Bob Broccoli, a lovable hillbilly bear strumming his guitar outside Smitty's Super Service Station, alongside his pal Looney Bird, a perpetually drunk bird in an oil barrel. They don't make them like they used to. Now, I'm not kidding when I say this band was incredible, both from a music standpoint and from a technological standpoint. Like I've said, these animatronics looked fantastic and were so revolutionary at the time because up until then, you could really only see animatronics of this caliber in the confines of Disney World. So to have these placed out in the open all across the United States truly introduced a brand new generation into the world of animatronics. Now, you can't find success without a few bumps in the road, and boy, was it a bumpy road. Pizza Time Theater actually went on to sue Robert Brock and Showbiz Pizza, alleging a breach of contract and a use of trade secrets, all of this stemming from when Robert Brock decided to go on and create his own new business venture. After many, many years of legal battles, this was eventually settled out of court, and ultimately Robert Brock and Showbiz Pizza agreed to pay Pizza Time Theater a portion of their proceeds for the next 14 years, adding up to several $1 million. So after hearing that, it sounds like Chuck E. Cheese won fair and square, and that's why Chuck E. Cheese still exists today and Showbiz Pizza doesn't. Right? If only it were that simple. In the early 1980s, video games became a lot more accessible with at-home consoles and several Chinese knockoffs flooding the market. This kind of accessibility was great for the consumer and an absolute death sentence for video arcades. Because why go spend money to play arcade games somewhere when you can play them for free in the comfort of your own home? Both Pizza Time Theater and Showbiz Pizza were absolutely hemorrhaging money at the time, leading both to close franchises and cut costs and basically do anything they could do to stop the bleeding. And by 1984, Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater officially declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy because they were losing tens of millions of dollars a month. But they had one more trick up their sleeve: the 1982 court settlement. Yes, Showbiz Pizza, who was not faring much better at the time, still owed Pizza Time Theater millions in profit share. So they concocted a little scheme. Showbiz Pizza Place would absorb and acquire Pizza Time Theater entirely, including its assets and its debt, and they would merge into a single company. Ah yes, who doesn't love a giant pizza conglomerate? In 1985, Showbiz Pizza Place Incorporated and Pizza Time Theater Incorporated officially merged, now becoming Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated. I feel like I'm having a stroke reading that. And they had a lot of work to do. Like I mentioned, neither company was doing well financially at this point. So with a new CEO appointed in Richard Frank, it was time to get to cleaning. Right off the bat, nearly 100 restaurants were immediately closed, bringing the total number of operating locations to just over 200. They tried to improve the food quality as much as one can with a Pizza Rat casino, and most importantly to our story, they contemplated removing the Rockafire explosion from all Showbiz Pizza stores. Now you might be asking, why would you get rid of the vastly superior Rockafire explosion animatronics and yet leave the inferior Chuck E. Cheese characters? There's a very simple answer to that. Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated did not own the rights to the Rockafire explosion. Those rights still laid with Creative Engineering, who only had a 10% share in the company. And the current state of relationships between Showbiz Corporate and Creative Engineering was strained, to say the least. Around this time, Showbiz Pizza had begun to experiment with creating their own show tapes with the Rockafire explosion. That meant rather than outsourcing the production and programming of these shows to Creative Engineering, they would cover everything in-house. This meant hiring sound-alike voice actors and completely reverse engineering the way Creative Engineering programs shows. And this was obviously something Creative Engineering was not fond of them doing, but ultimately they were well within their rights to do it under the current licensing agreement. But this whole process got Showbiz Pizza thinking, wouldn't it be a lot easier to just get rid of the Rockafire explosion entirely? They wouldn't have to pay Creative Engineering any licensing fees, they wouldn't have to outsource any more work, they would have 100% total control over their show. So they started doing some experimenting. For example, in 1986, they contracted a new company to retrofit Rolfe and Earl into the Statue of Liberty. This animatronic only used a few select movements from the Rolfe and Earl animatronic, namely the head left and right, the body turn left and right, and an arm twist and bend. There's actually some footage of this animatronic in action thanks to a random person filming on their camcorder back in the 80s, and as you can see, it's just very underwhelming compared to Rolfe and Earl. Like, imagine you run to Showbiz Pizza excited to see a 21-movement animatronic, but instead you're presented with a 6-movement monstrosity. This concept was rolled out to 170 Showbiz locations in the summer of '86, and it seemed to have done well enough because Showbiz Pizza moved straight ahead with their next character, Retrofit. And this one you might recognize.
Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear. Yogi Bear is always in the ranger's hair.
Yes, the next retrofit of the Rockafire explosion was Yogi Bear and Boo Boo. These two animatronics would reside on stage left where Looney Bird and Billy Bob are usually located, and while the Boo Boo animatronic utilized the Looney Bird mechanism, the Yogi Bear also used the Rolfe and Earl retrofit like before, which at this point makes Rolfe and Earl the most heavily retrofitted character in Rockafire explosion history. We unfortunately do not have any footage of this show in action, we just have a couple still photos as well as the audio from the show tape. It is truly my white whale of Rockafire lost media. There could be some footage out there sitting on someone's old camcorder and they just don't know we're looking for it. If you're watching this video and thinking to yourself, I might actually have footage of this from when I was a kid, please email me. If you somehow come to me with video footage of this show that is not publicly available, I will straight up pay you $250. Let the search begin. Unlike the Statue of Liberty retrofit, this character retrofit seems to have been a bit of a logistical nightmare behind the scenes. Thanks to some archive documents over on showbizpizza.com, we can tell that across the 3 rolled out locations, the contracted company somehow managed to not send a packing list, not send installation instructions, send out unsewn cosmetics, send out incorrectly assembled parts, and I want to point out the pettiest part of this letter. In the list of mistakes for the Nebraska location, they state, 3 legs were shipped for Yogi. We felt lucky. And then further down in the list of mistakes for the Colorado location, they state, only 1 leg was sent. Unfortunately, we know where the other one was. Beautiful no notes. And they sign off this letter to Creative Presentations, Inc. with an ultimatum. As insignificant and petty as these problems may seem on the surface, they resulted in extra work on the part of many people, extended out-of-town stays, numerous long-distance phone calls, and excessive use of Federal Express, all of which are not free. If this project were to roll out, the lack of attention to detail demonstrated above could translate into thousands of dollars of unplanned and hidden expenses to our company. If the Statue of Liberty rollout had gone as poorly as the installation of these 2 prototypes, I'd venture to say we would not be doing Yogi with Creative Presentations Inc. today. However, we do know that CPI was at one time capable of excellent and reliable work. Despite numerous discussions with and written correspondence to Jean Ballard, I have yet to feel that they are exhibiting the concern and attention to our project that they require. I am looking for ways to elicit the quality response we need from CPI, and I welcome any suggestions. So it probably wouldn't surprise you that Showbiz Pizza did not continue with an extended rollout of the Yogi Bear show. Ultimately, it seemed like these one-off character retrofits just weren't bringing in the type of revenue the company was expecting. Either that or these retrofits were just too expensive to constantly roll out and test in different stores. So Showbiz Pizza came up with the simplest idea of all. Let's just keep the Rockafire explosion. People loved the Rockafire explosion. Heck, Billy Bob was the face of their entire brand, so you don't want to just throw that away. And so they plan to move forward with a new chapter of the Rockafire explosion. But there was a catch. Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated wanted the full copyrights to the Rockafire explosion IP. Up to this point, while Showbiz Pizza still had control over the actual animatronics in their restaurant, they still didn't own the likenesses of those characters, as they were still licensed from Aaron Fector and Creative Engineering. According to Aaron Fector, Gene Cram, who was the vice president of Showbiz at the time, came to him and basically laid it out.
He said, Aaron, what you get out of this is that your characters, Billy Bob, will live. They'll live on. But let me tell you something, if you don't accept this deal, and if you don't give us your copyrights, your characters are going to die. We're going to get rid of them, and we're going to replace them with Chuck E. Cheese. I said, okay, I'll take that challenge.
Aaron still had very high hopes for the future of the Rockafire explosion, and so he refused to sign over the rights. And now, we have finally reached the entire point of this video. Welcome to Concept Unification.
Welcome to the Concept Unification installation tape. The purpose of this tape is to give you a brief overview of the installation process. This tape is meant to supplement the installation manual, not replace it. If you have any questions about measurements or placement, please refer to the manual.
In broad terms, concept unification was a term coined by Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated to describe the process of changing over all of their animatronic shows in Showbiz Pizza Places and Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time theaters into a single unified concept. This process would involve completely removing any and all identifying features of the Rockafire Explosion animatronics and retrofitting them with new cosmetics that more ideally aligned with their brand. Because remember, Showbiz Pizza does not own the character licenses of the Rockafire Explosions, but they do own the mechanical structures underneath. Now, Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated had numerous well-documented plans to fully get rid of the Rockafire explosion, and their first plan involved creating brand new characters. Luckily, there are a boatload of archived documents about how they were going to go about changing the Rockafire explosion into these characters, and we're gonna go into that now. Option 1, move Mitzi to stage left with Billy Bob, move Looney Bird to stage right with Rolfe and Earl, and rearrange Fats, Duke, and Beach Bear to different locations center stage. Fats will become an old orangutan, Duke will become a chimpanzee, Beach Bear becomes ape, Billy Bob becomes short, fat hillbilly bear, so not much changed there. Mitzi becomes tall, skinny hillbilly bear, Rolfe becomes old rabbit magician holding top hat, and Earl becomes a small rabbit who peeks out of the top hat. Looney Bird becomes a heckler rabbit who pops out of a giant top hat. So option 1 seems to be lacking a lot of variety. We have, let's see, 3 rabbits, 2 bears, and 3 monkeys, and the rabbit just seems like it's from a completely different universe, so I can see why it was scrapped. Option 2, all characters would remain on their same respective stages. Fats becomes a big, ugly bear. Man, they're really roasting these characters for no reason. Duke becomes the bobcat drummer. Beach Bear becomes a big bird, not the big bird. I feel like I should be very clear with that. Mitzi becomes a cute fox, Billy Bob becomes lion, Looney Bird becomes rabbit in a top hat, which is a carryover from the last concept, and Rolfe becomes a comic female sheep, and Earl becomes her fox puppet. So with option 2, they are really doing the bare minimum because nearly every characteristic of these animatronics somehow stayed intact, including Rolfe and Earl being turned into a comedian and their puppet, and the rest of the Rockafire explosion having a center stage band presence. I feel like this option works a lot better than the first option, but it just comes off as a cheap ripoff of the Rockafire explosion, which is what they ended up doing anyway, but we'll get to that. Option 3, all characters remain on their same respective stages. Fats becomes a lion, Duke becomes a leopard, Beach Bear becomes a tiger, Mitzi becomes a pretty cat, and this center stage band would come to be known as the Wildcats. So eat your heart out, Troy Bolton. Billy Bob becomes a safari dog, Looney Bird becomes a small, scroungy hound dog, his pet, which means a dog owning a dog as a pet, so we're nothing to see here, folks. And finally, Rolfe becomes an alligator, and Earl becomes a fish in the fishbowl he's holding. So again, more of the same with option 3. I mean, they did give the center stage band a name this time, so I guess that's a step in the right direction. And finally, option 4. They were going to fully lean into the Hanna-Barbera licensing and permanently make the Rockafire explosion the Yogi Bear show. Fats and Mitzi would be moved to stage left, Billy Bob would be moved to center stage, and Looney Bird would be moved to stage right. Billy Bob would become Yogi Bear, Duke would become Boo Boo, Beach Bear would become Snagglepuss, and then pulled from previous concepts, Fats would become an ugly bear, Mitzi would become a pretty fox, Rolfe and Earl would become the magician rabbit duo, and Looney Bird would round out the rabbit stage in his top hat. So there you have it, 4 equally valid options for retrofitting the Rockafire explosion and hopefully turning this sinking ship around. And so when all was said and done, the company decided to go with option 5, none of the above. That's right, all these concepts were scrapped and never made it past the initial sketch designs. None of these characters were ever fabricated in real life to our knowledge because Showbiz Pizza had a much better idea. Why try and create all new characters when we have a perfectly wonderful set of characters sitting right in front of us? The Pizza Time players. Showbiz Pizza Time immediately went all hands on deck trying to find a way to convert the Rockafire explosion into this new Chuck E. Cheese themed stage, and they had an idea. Some of the Pizza Time theater locations already utilized a stage known as the Rocker stage. This stage featured cyberamic versions of Chucky, Munch, Helen, Pasquale, and Jasper, all on an old house facade. And so for concept unification, it seemed like a no-brainer to just recreate this vibe, but on a much larger scale. So here's the design they came up with, and unlike the Rockafire explosion on 3 stages, this show would only take over 2 stages. Mitzi Mozzarella would be transformed into Chuck E. Cheese himself, Duke LaRue would be turned into Helen Henny. While Duke played the drums, Helen played the keyboard, but the up and down movement of the arms still worked in this case. Beach Bear would be turned into Jasper T. Jowls. On stage left, Fats was turned into Pasquale P. Pieplate, who wasn't actually playing any instruments, but rather making pizza. And now you might be wondering, where's Mr. Munch? The answer? Everywhere. Mr. Munch was unique in that he took the form of several animatronics hidden across the stages so he could move from location to location seamlessly. The animatronic characters he ended up taking over include Looney Bird, a character we've previously talked about, and 4 different prop characters which I have not discussed previously. The Sun, the Moon, Choo Choo the Bear, and Antioch. All 4 of these characters are very limited in movement, using only 1 or 2 cylinders apiece, so it was just easy to skip over them earlier. Now this is what we know today as the Concept Unification prototype stage, which, spoiler alert, that means they didn't use it. But they did retrofit at least 1 show with this concept in their headquarters, and that's why we have these 3 photos from over the years. And for the past 30 plus years, it was believed, or at that point it was known, that this was never installed in any Showbiz Pizza locations. That is, until a random YouTube video shows up in 2024 titled Nadia's Birthday at Showbiz Pizza, May 1990. This is just a lengthy video of some home movies someone finally got around to digitizing, and at 15 minutes and 35 seconds in, we see this.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, prepare yourselves for the most stupendous, spectacular, fantastic, and phantasmagorical entertainment event of a lifetime. Presenting the Toon Machine. Mamma Mia!
An open secret for 34 years, this concept unification prototype was actually installed in at least one location in Dallas, Texas. This was possibly the biggest lost media find in Chuck E. Cheese and Rockafire history, and will likely stay that way. Unless someone comes forward with the Yogi Bear footage, please email me. So with this stage newly furnished in a Showbiz Pizza store, the company started to get feedback on what worked, what didn't work, and how to move forward with the retrofit. Ultimately, the consensus was this stage lacked something that the Rockafire explosion encapsulated so well: the energy and literal depiction of a band on stage. The Rockafire explosion truly felt like you were watching a concert, whereas this new Chuck E. Cheese stage seems like an amalgamation of a live children's television show. Another thing they found in their market research was that girls loved Mitzi Mozzarella. While the band as a whole was enjoyable to anybody at any age, young girls really resonated with Mitzi as a young, peppy cheerleader. One really interesting thing to note is that Mitzi Mozzarella is the only character in the Rockafire explosion to have a canonical age. Shalisa James started voicing Mitzi at just 11 years old, and it was decided very early on that every year that Shalisa aged, Mitzi would age alongside her. So every year when Shalisa got a year older, so would Mitzi. This allowed her to really play herself on stage and talk about things that her as a teenage girl is experiencing right now, and that makes her extremely relatable. And if you're wondering, Mitzi Mozzarella is now canonically 55 years old, whereas the rest of the band is frozen eternally in limbo. All right, back to the retrofit. One last thing they wanted to take from the Rockafire explosion and implement in their new stage was the idea of a leading frontman, one that they currently had in Fats Geronimo. So how on earth were they going to retain all of these elements while still changing out the IP? I'll tell you how. By doing the bare minimum. I know I've done several fake outs over the last however long I've been talking about this, about concept unification prototypes and different designs and different concepts. The concept we are about to discuss is the final concept that was in fact rolled out in stores across the country. Here is the basic outline on how they planned on retrofitting these animatronics. Rolfe and Earl would stay on stage right, Fats, Beach Bear, and Mitzi would stay on center stage, and Duke would be moved over to stage left with Looney Bird, replacing Billy Bob entirely. Rolfe and Earl would become Chuck E. Cheese, Mitzi would become the new younger Helen Henny, Fats would become Mr. Munch, Beach Bear would become Jasper T. Jowls, Duke would become Pasquale Pie Plate, and Looney Bird would become a new character, Pizza Cam. Billy Bob was left out of this concept entirely, and all stores were instructed to either destroy him or use him for parts, and we know how well that worked out. Now, if Showbiz wanted all of their stores across the country to easily and efficiently retrofit the Rockafire explosion, they were going to have to come up with some sort of manual. And oh boy did they. In addition to a physical manual, corporate decided to create a concept unification VHS tape that walked you through the exact process of dismantling and reinstalling the entire stage. And although likely unintentional, these tapes come off as both sad and just straight up horrifying. During the dismantling phase of the Rockafire explosion, they play some of the most depressing music that I have ever heard in my life. One of the most iconic songs associated with concept unification is Port of Mystery by Yanni, or is it Laurel? So I would highly recommend putting that on in the background while you listen to the rest of this video, just for the ambiance. Now, these walkthroughs were very thorough, telling you what cosmetics to take off, what order to do it in, and showing visually our entire childhood just being destroyed. Just as an example, here's how they describe the process of removing the character Fats.
Next, we will do Fats. Although this picture does not reflect it, if you have removed the organ, it will make his cosmetics easier to get off. First, do his jacket, hands, mask, leg fur, and feet. Unbolt Fats' Mac valve quick disconnect, push up through the stage, then unbolt and remove Fats from the stage.
The most chilling part is always when they are told in no uncertain terms that they are to destroy props and characters as they will never be used again.
Remove all props such as Choo Choo's tree, Billy Bob's lamp, Billy Bob's campfire, Looney Bird's can, all rocks and flowers, and destroy all of these props as they will not be used again.
This is a methodology that Chuck E. Cheese corporate has still stood by to this very day, and you can watch some of my other videos on the topic, but that is a story for another day. Once each character was removed from the stage, everything was torn down. The walls, the backdrops, the carpet was ripped off. They were basically starting from scratch. And then slowly, one by one, the characters were reintroduced to the stage in their new positions. And since we watched them brutally murder my boy Fats, I think it's only fair that we show them bastardize and retrofit him. So here you go.
Exchange the old organ front for the new organ front, making sure to destroy the old organ front. Next is Munch, starting with his hands, then mask, cap, body fur, and feet.
So by this point in the tape, all store employees should have successfully converted over the following characters. Mitzi, Fats, and Beach Bear took up center stage as Helen, Mr. Munch, and Jasper respectively, and on stage left you had Duke and Looney Bird being turned into Pasquale and Pizza Cam. But wait, what about Rolfe and Earl? What about Chuck E. Cheese? So the process of switching over all of these characters was always planned to take about a week, with store employees only working overnight on the installation when the store is not open. But Showbiz still wanted to have their animatronic show running in some capacity during this 1 week period, so they came up with an ingenious idea: the Rolfe and Earl Show. During this week of renovations, Rolfe and Earl would remain untouched on stage left, hosting a clip show of sorts, showing off the best moments of the Rockafire explosion on screens in the showroom. Of course, creative engineering would never agree to voice the demise of their own characters, so they just used a sound-alike voice for Rolfe and Earl.
The Rolfe Will Show! Featuring Rolfe the Wolf! And sidekick Earl Smurl!
So it must be the Earl and Rolfe Show!
You wish. No chance, my handy little friend.
And this Rolfe and Earl show tape, much like the Concept Unification VHS tape, is quite dark and eerie. The two characters are constantly referring to the absence of the Rockafire explosion characters on the other two stages, with Earl freaking out and asking Rolfe questions like,
So what's going on? Where's everybody else? Why are the curtains closed?
Questions, questions, questions. Well, there are some pretty groovy changes going on behind those curtains.
Oh yeah? Like what?
Like some new faces here at Showbiz.
and Rolfe, believe it or not, knows all the answers and keeps giving subtle hints to the audience and Earl about who could be taking over.
Yeah, I'll give you a hint. What has big ears,
An elephant.
a long pointed nose,
An anteater.
and wears a red derby hat?
A red derby hat?
Think about it, wise guy.
Earl can never quite figure out what's happening over these show tapes, but at the very end, it's almost as if he becomes sentient and realizes what's about to happen to him.
The curtains will open on a whole new Showbiz stage in just a few days. So come back for a treat you'll appreciate over and over again.
Hey, wait a minute. Hey, what about us? What are we gonna do?
No prob, man. I know a great little room in Tahoe. They're looking for a stand-up act with a dummy.
And perhaps most eerily of all, as the curtains close one final time on Rolfe and Earl has a eureka moment and loudly screams,
I'm no dummy. Just because I thought it was Mr. Ed, you go calling me a dummy. It was as plain as the fangs on your face. It was Chuck E. Cheese with the big ears.
And just like that, Rolfe and Earl are never heard from or seen again. During the final night of Concept Unification, much like all the other characters, Rolfe and Earl were to be dismantled and turned into Chuck E. Cheese. And by the time the store opened the next morning, the full animatronic show would be operational, now branded as Munch's Make-Believe Band. And I've always imagined that as a child, that could be really traumatic if you had a connection with the Rockafire explosion and you walked into Showbiz Pizza one day and there was just this amalgamation of characters of your beloved show performing on stage. Their silhouettes are so clearly still the Rockafire explosion that it's just like a serial killer just wearing the skin of its victim and dancing around and singing on stage and like, everything's normal! This version of Concept Unification was initially only tested in a single location, the same location that tested the previous concept, but there was a problem. And that problem is, there was a rat. and I'm not talking Chucky. In 1990, when this stage debuted in Texas, someone took a couple photos of the stage and sent them off to creative engineering and Aaron Fechter. I should note that up until this point, creative engineering had no insight into what Showbiz or Chuck E. Cheese was planning on doing. I mean, they knew that ultimately they were probably going to get rid of the Rockafire explosion, but they never could have expected this. So when those leaked images came across their desk, creative engineering was livid. Showbiz tried to do some damage control by giving them a delayed notice that they are getting rid of the Rockafire explosion, but keeping things very intentionally vague. And so, the executive vice president of creative engineering, Melvin A. Fechter, who just happened to be Aaron Fechter's dad, wrote Showbiz a scathing letter. And lucky for us, this letter too was archived over on showbizpizza.com, so we have all the tea. Get ready, because this is a long one. Dear Ron, I will thank you for your letter of August 9th. I regret that I cannot thank you for its content. I will try to cover in this letter various issues between us. I note your language that you are in the process of re-identifying our show to eliminate the Rockafire characters. This is the first language, if I understand it correctly, that we have received from Showbiz to this effect. In Dick Frank's last conversation with Aaron, his words were to the effect that your effort on this was a failure and that you did not intend to proceed with such an effort at this time. He told Aaron further that he would keep him informed. Your words now, however, appear to confirm rumors that till now we have only received from secondary sources and from photographs that recently have reached us. To the effect, namely, that you are proceeding to change out the licensed products, retaining the underlying mechanics unaltered in any way, and related electronic components, and thus retaining all of the identical movements of our characters and their shapes and forms, altering only the superficial exteriors of the characters by changing the masks and costumes in all Showbiz and franchisee restaurants. I have been told, although I have not seen them, that you have 2 such changeouts in operation at this time. I do not question the right of Showbiz to remove the Rockafire explosion altogether from its stages, subject to the limitation of what you do with the characters so removed. I do, however, question your right to disparage and caricature our characters by turning them into whatsises with clearly the identical movements and forms. No, Ron, this is not acceptable. Don't denigrate and parody the Rockafire characters with a mere change in superficial coverings and pretend you think you have something totally different. Let me now turn to other matters. I will call first to your attention the following language, which is the first sentence of Section 4D of the Settlement and License Agreement. All rights not specifically granted herein to one or both of Showbiz and BHC are reserved by Creative and Fechter. The Rockafire explosion is our intellectual property, not yours. There can be no doubt to our right to manufacture it afresh and sell such non-retained shows to whomever we please. There is nothing in the Settlement and License Agreement to prohibit it, and I refer you specifically to the language quoted above from 4D. Rest assured that if I tell you a show was wholly manufactured in 1990, I am prepared to prove it. It will be no mere allegation. I suggest that you and Dick Frank stop looking through your rose-colored glasses from the point of view of Showbiz, wishing that what you wished was is. Neither you nor Dick participated in the composition of the Settlement and License Agreement. Showbiz did, however, pay high-priced counsel to prepare it over a period of 4 or 5 months, and I have assumed that it means just what it says. Tom Corcoran, who shortly thereafter became chairman of Showbiz, or was it president, had some input to the language, and so did I. The simple truth is Showbiz thought Creative was all washed up at the time of the Settlement and License Agreement because of the heavy burden it had left us under, and that we would never again be able to manufacture anything. Indeed, rumors were rife among its franchisees, from what source, that we were in bankruptcy. Sorry to have disappointed you. Your interpretation of the Settlement and License Agreement's intent is hogwash. More accurately, it is stated in the following whereas clause, whereas the parties hereto desire to settle and forever discharge all rights, claims, and obligations among them upon the terms and conditions set forth in this agreement. And that includes that you have no rights to the licensed products as well as the Rockafire characters, except such that are specifically stated in the Settlement and License Agreement. Coexistence? What that means to Showbiz is that Creative should lie peacefully in its tomb. Approximately 6 years, I believe, have passed since we last received any deposits for any purpose from Showbiz under the manufacturing, sales, and licensing agreement. And indeed, I noted a few years ago in one of your annual statements that the payments made to Creative in the last year of our relationship under the manufacturing, sales, and license agreement were grossly overstated. But I suggest that you not attempt to impose upon us limitations as to which of our copyrighted characters we may now manufacture or to whom we may sell such electronimation products manufactured now. So much for non-retained shows. I turn now to the issue of lease versus sale. The language of Section 3 means what it says, no more, no less. I never thought it intended more, and I certainly don't now. By what legal authority or precedent do you think sale means lease? I assure you that if I say we have leased a show, I will be talking about a true lease. Do you suggest that your counsel was not able to compose language sufficiently broad to include a lease? I will inform you now that Rockafire Explosion shows have already been contracted for, going within 4 miles of a Showbiz restaurant, that fall within one or more of the categories of my letter on August 2nd. I note that you say we have no intention of disposing of the character likenesses in a manner that would anyway violate the terms of the settlement and license agreement. Thank you. You have done this in the past. In fact, we have bought back complete shows from third parties. Thank you for not doing so in the future. As we've previously discussed, your compliance with this provision of the settlement and license agreement is a vital matter to Creative. Creative was never unwilling to work out a fair arrangement with Showbiz on the continuing use of the Rockafire Explosion, intact, and even now is not unwilling, within the limits of contracts now with third parties, but have been confronted by hostility, I think, from certain sources in Showbiz, and I have felt the arrogance of a much larger company. In the settlement and license agreement, Creative gave up perhaps tens of millions of dollars of benefits under the manufacturing, sales, and licensing agreement. Do not now attempt to deprive us of what little benefit of the bargain we derived under the settlement and license agreement. Showbiz has made such efforts in the past to our considerable detriment. If, however, Showbiz has now made the irrevocable decision to wash its hands finally and fully of the Rockafire characters, as I believe your letter of August 9th implies, I must ask you to do so properly. The best way to do that would be to remove the Rockafire characters altogether from your stages, completely, from Fatz's tapping toes to Duke's antennae, their entire bodies together with their accompanying props, and replace them with Chucky or other animation and software of your own design, manufactured and produced to your order by a third party. But in any event, if you do retain any of the underlying mechanisms of the Rockafire characters, do not merely change their superficial exterior coverings. Of course, change out their fur, garments, and masks, but that alone is not enough. Change the shapes and forms of the characters and their movements. It will not do, for example, to change Fats into a purple Whatses of precisely the same shape, of precisely the same gestures and movements, and playing, indeed, Fats's unique organ with only the Rockafire name removed. Remove all props that are clearly part of the Rockafire show, and do not use any software which we provided for the Rockafire show either before or after the settlement and licensing agreement, or that was provided by others for the Rockafire show with approval by us. Do not simply parody and debase the Rockafire Explosion. Sincerely, Melvin A. Fector, General Counsel. What a doozy. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, but from what I'm garnering from that letter, Creative Engineering was not a fan of what Showbiz was doing at the time, and in the end, did this sternly worded letter have any effect on what Showbiz and Chuck E. Cheese were going to do with the animatronics? No, it did not. As much as Creative Engineering would have loved for Chuck E. Cheese to get rid of these very expensive animatronics and start over again, they very clearly had the right to keep them. They did not change the shapes or movements of the characters for the most part. I think the biggest mechanical change they did implement was removing Earl from Rolfe and giving Chucky a new mechanical arm. But other than that, it is nearly identical in almost every way. And by 1993, all Rockafire Explosion shows in all Showbiz Pizza restaurants had been successfully converted into Chuck E. Cheese stages, marking the end of concept unification. And what a sad ending it is. Even though the animatronics did live on for many years, they were continuously neglected and not taken care of, leading them to be just a husk of what they used to be. And as we all know now, animatronics have been phased out of most Chuck E. Cheese locations, meaning there are very few locations where you can actually see either Munch's Make Believe Band or the Rockafire Explosion today. If you want to know more about those locations, I did make a video last year about it, so go check that out. But as of now, it's basically our job as animatronic fans to keep the legacy of Munch's Make Believe Band and the Rockafire Explosion alive, because Chuck E. Cheese certainly doesn't want to. And if you're gonna try and tell me that putting a mannequin version of an animatronic in an adults-only Chuck E. Cheese arcade is their way of respecting its legacy, I don't buy it. But that's a story for another video. So there you have it, concept unification in a nutshell. A very big nutshell. It's a story I've always found so fascinating, and so I am so honored that I've gotten to sit down and just info dump this on unsuspecting YouTube viewers who just wanted a simple video essay. Sorry! Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And hey, look at this shirt. You can buy this shirt. Now, some would say it's styled to look like a classic pizza arcade chain's uniform, but I say it's the Bot Cave uniform. And it's adorned with a little Sully logo on the side. How cute. If you'd like to support the channel, consider buying one of these shirts. I think I make maybe like $1 off of it, so that'll pay for something. But seriously, thank you guys so much for all of your support. You can become a member today for just $1 a month, and you can get bonus videos and more information about my animatronics. But otherwise, I genuinely just appreciate if you've even watched to this point. I can never thank you enough. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, be kind to one another, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.